Welcome back to the Cat Dad Show. I'm your host, Scott Colby. Now, on this episode of the Cat Dad Show, I'm excited because we're joined by Shannon MacFarlane, founder of Slobbered Lens. She's a memorial artist, death doula, and grief educator who helps families navigate the difficult emotions of losing a beloved pet. Today, we're diving into how creativity can be a powerful tool in the grieving process, and you're going to learn how you can honor your pets and embrace your emotions through art, photography, and more. Shannon, welcome to the Cat Dad Show.
I'm so glad to be here. I'm also wrangling one of my cats. So I'm gonna
Oh,
try to keep her from bumping into the microphone, but I can't
and
make any promises.
who's that you got with you?
Let me see if I can lift her up here. This is Maisie.
Hi, Maisie.
Maisie has no eyeballs, so
No
she's
eyeball.
a little hard to see on
Yeah.
camera because she doesn't have any light spots to reflect. But
What a sweetheart. How old is she?
she, uh, how old are you, May? 3. She's 3.
Um, Shannon, let's just kind of jump right in because, the audience they don't want to know about us. They want to know about kind of the things we do and how we help cats and pets. So I know you work closely with families during some of their hardest times. What role do you think creativity plays in processing grief, especially after the loss of a pet?
Oh gosh, that is such a great question. Okay, well, from a neuroscience perspective, creativity is play. And we know that from studying brains at play, play being when you're engaged in something and you're losing track of time, you're tuning out other things, that brains are, well, there goes the microphone. Brains are way more efficient when they are engaged in play. And because creativity is a form of play, and because grief is very hard mental work, because we're feeling things, we're having emotions to process, we're dealing with some of the logistical things that happen after, oh my gosh, cat,
I love it.
after a loss. Um, And all of that is made easier when we can have an approach. I don't want to say that's lighthearted,
Mm.
but something where there's permission to be with yourself the way that you are. And creativity is a practice that I think can help us get a lot closer to that without as much pressure. Because a lot of the stuff that's built around helping grievers grieve is things that are more, I guess they appeal more to logical people because the teachers are doing what they can to try to break things down so that they seem linear because people are used to being able to follow instructions. Here are the 5 things that you need to do, or
Mm.
try these, the clickbait things where here's one weird hack that you can do that's going to make all of this better. Um, Creativity, like grieving, is a practice. It is something that improves with time. So,
It's that. Well, and faith.
this is so great. Um, and I talk with a lot of adults, particularly that say, well, I'm not creative and I'm not artistic, so I can't do this. This is off limits to me. And I ask them, hey, have you ever learned how to ride a bicycle or drive a car? Well, yeah, of course, everybody does that, which is not true. Not everybody does that. But I'll say, well, the first time you did that, it was probably really overwhelming. And you were trying to figure out the mechanics of what your body was supposed to do. You were trying to pay attention to where you were going so you didn't run into anyone or anything else. You were also paying attention to where you were going from a navigation perspective, right? And in the beginning, like I remember when I was learning how to drive, the first couple of years, I was super anxious about it. I I couldn't have a conversation with someone while I was driving because I was so nervous that I was going
Mm.
to run into something. And now I've been driving for 3 decades, and I just don't think about the process much anymore. And for me, creativity is like that. The more I do it, the easier it becomes. And I don't want to say that about grief. I don't think that's fair. But in terms of actually doing the work part of getting through the places where we we are able to talk to ourselves and say, it's all right to feel these things right now. Or actually, I have this thing that I have to go to. I have an appointment and I need to be able to go to the appointment and speak so that I can be understood by this other person. So I can't feel this right now, but I will feel it later this afternoon. And I guess that's what I mean with the work part of it, is knowing when we have space to do things and when we need to kind of um, hold things down just for a little bit and come back to them. But that practice gets stronger the more that we do it. And with creativity, it's just so much easier to engage with that. And it takes some of the pressure off of doing it right, I guess I would say.
Yeah. And we'll get into more specifics in terms of what that could actually look like for somebody who is grieving the loss of their pet. Now, I know one thing that you do, Shannon, is that you take photos, right, of maybe a pet owner and their pet who might be, there in their last few weeks or few months. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and
Yeah.
how that process looks like for you and the family?
Yeah. So there's variations of this. People are very hesitant to schedule a photography session when they're realizing, okay, my family member is going to die. Um, it feels like, I think it's kind of similar to people talking about death or talking about hospice, that if I talk about it, then that means it's going to happen sooner. And that's not how it works. Um, I encourage people to schedule something like that as soon as they can while everybody is feeling as well as they can. But sometimes it happens that I show up on the day that euthanasia is scheduled, and I might be there in the morning with the family, and then euthanasia appointment is in the afternoon or in the early evening. And it's going through, and in that case, it would be going through and documenting some of the last things. So many families will choose to have something like a sort of an all out bucket list kind of day where maybe the animal gets to eat things that have always been off limits, or they go to a favorite place, or it's a sit on the sofa and be under a blanket for all day. Oh, there's a cat eating guinea pigs. Mm,
Is what? Oh my
She's
God.
going to rip open that bag. I'm
It's live TV.
going to take this off and get her out of here.
Okay.
And then I will be right back.
Yeah.
You got to leave. You can leave.
Yeah, I was gonna say, listen, I'm looking forward to hearing more about this. Just wanted to briefly interject. My very first guest for the Cat Dad show is a pet photographer, and one of the things she offers is the same thing that you are mentioning, kind of a photo session between you, the pet owner, and a senior pet or a pet that may be sick, and the end is fairly near. And when I first heard of that, I never heard of that before, and I thought, oh my gosh, I wish I had had this with both of my cats that passed
Mhm.
away. And one of my cats was sick for a long time that passed away, and the other one wasn't. But in both instances, there wasn't a euthanasia appointment. I
Mhm.
took them to see the vet, and I didn't know that was gonna be the last
Oh,
one. But regardless, especially Mia, my 20-year-old that passed last year, who was ill, and I knew the end was kinda near, would have loved to have a session like you're talking about. But yeah, please continue.
well, I think so. Most of the families that I support are in the situation where the animal has been diagnosed with something that's
Yeah.
chronic or progressive. and is really pretty scary and life changing.
Yeah.
And so from the time that they receive this diagnosis, they go through a lot of really complicated emotions and a lot of mental turmoil because they are the person that's responsible for making all of these medical decisions for someone. And for me, this photography is not so much about being able to provide memento type things to people. It is me showing up as a human and really unflinchingly taking in everything that's there and reflecting it back to people and acknowledging them in all of the things that they're feeling and saying, yeah, this really does suck. It's devastating and it's terrible. And I wish that this weren't happening. I really, really do. And we can't make it better and we can't make it go away. We live in this culture, though, where there's so much emphasis on giving it a couple of weeks. And then by then, you should be able to get back to normal and just carry on. And whether or not we mean to rush people through that is a whole other thing. But even people with the best intentions, we wind up asking questions like, well, when are you going to get another cat?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And it feels very achy. So this process for me is really about focusing on the human's well-being and paying attention to the littlest things. So the way that I structure my sessions, I will talk to people quite a bit beforehand, or we exchange messages, whichever makes more sense for them. And I will ask them about the things that they're going to miss, the things that they're not going to miss. I'm going to ask them about really memorable stories, how they met, how long they've been together, what's been hard about being family, what's been easy, how they've changed over time because of this creature's influence on them. And when I am there with them doing whatever it is that we're doing, I am looking for the outward expression of those things that they talked about. Because now I know what's important to them and what's meaningful to them. So if I can find little glimpses of that show up in the interactions that they have with each, that's really what I'm after. I'm not so keen on the Instagram beautiful, gorgeous
Mm.
portrait things. Those are nice. And I think that everybody appreciates those. But when I watch people go through the images of their sessions from this particular type of photography session, the things that they get hung up on are the really, really small details that they might even say that they've never noticed before. And I'm
Mhm.
sure that they have. It's just the kind of thing, it's the stuff that gets overlooked a lot. And we don't, when life is moving at real speed, we're not slowing things down with a hundredth of a second with a shutter. Um, it just feels different to see it still. And that's really what I want to give to people. A glimpse of those tiny, slow moments where they are connected so that when they go back and they look at these photos, that they can transport themselves there when they're ready.
Gosh, that's beautiful. God, I love that you take the time to get to know the relationship, the special bond between the pet and the owner, and you try to capture that in your shots. What a special thing that you do. That's incredible. And then as a a death doula, for those that don't understand what that is, or maybe they've never heard of that, can you explain what that is and then what your role is for somebody that maybe has lost a pet and how you would kind of help them navigate the aftermath?
Certainly. So a death doula, if you break down the word doula, comes from Greek and it means a woman who serves. And historically, when people and animals that have been important to us have died, we have taken care of the dead ourselves. And this goes back to the Civil War, but the modern funeral industry or profession, they don't like it when I use the word industry.
Mhm.
The modern funeral profession came about during the Civil War when there were so many bodies to process and people just couldn't, they were out in fields and they couldn't get back home, right? So it wasn't that long ago that families were caring for their dead and they were doing all of that stuff. And we had family burial plots or church burial plots. And now it is a big business and a big profession. And that has come into the world of caring for animals as well. And so a death doula is somebody that supports, can be an advocate for the one who is dying and also supports the family. And I think helps make the balance between the two. This is a little more complicated when it comes to human deaths compared to animal deaths. Um, But there is a very real tendency for the people who are grieving and caregiving to insert themselves more into the center of what this is all like and make it about themselves because they're feeling all of this overwhelming stuff.
Mm.
So being able to, keep that in perspective and remind people that, hey, this is actually about this cat here who is dying. This is not about you. But do it in a very compassionate way because all of this work is about compassion. But on the more practical side, it's about things like, okay, so we're finishing up hospice. We've elected not to do euthanasia, and we're going to do an unassisted death at home. What is going to happen? What things can I expect to see? And then how can I help my cat be more comfortable during this time? Or even through the euthanasia process, what things can we expect to see? Because the veterinarians are usually very good about communicating this information, but sometimes it feels,
Mm.
and sometimes people don't want to ask the vets because they feel like they should know already or it's embarrassing somehow or so showing up as a doula means that I provide support for people to lean on. And then I can also just talk them through the process of what dying is like, what death is like, what aftercare is like, what options they have in terms of how they want to care for their beloved's body. If they want to do aquamation, or they want to do reclamation, or they want to do cremation, or they want to do soil burial, all of those different things, and introduce them maybe to some rituals or ceremonies that are not religious in nature, but more of just an openly spiritual type of thing so that they can start building their own practice for how they're going to deal with things like anniversaries
Mm.
of death or anniversaries of diagnosis, because that's another big one that comes up, birthdays, things like that. It's there's a lot of practical stuff in there, but really I think the biggest part is the emotional support. I always liken it to being sort of grandmotherly,
Mm.
where and we see this a lot in animal societies like elephants and orcas, where the grandmothers are the ones, they know all of the stuff, right? If you've got a problem, you go talk to grandma because she knows. And these matriarchal societies are just so, they're so tender and they're so wise. And this work feels a lot like that to me. I don't have all of the answers, but my job isn't to tell anybody what to do. It's to be there beside them while they're figuring it out and maybe putting some things in their path to discover so that they don't have to work so hard to get there.
Mm. Yeah. Gosh, I love this. Just thinking about my own instance of losing a couple of cats, and I live by myself. So, looking for support, there's nobody home. There's not any other kind of family members to lean on. So, I think having somebody like you would have been very beneficial for me. And I can see like, yeah, anniversaries of
Yeah.
graduation days and birthdays and diagnoses days. I mean, I've got all those in my head and
Hmm.
those challenging as those come up. And then kind of the after the death, then maybe you help them with the rituals, but do you also help pet owners? Grief can be ongoing, for months, years. Do you also help people through that process of grieving over the, upcoming weeks after the death of a pet?
Yeah, most of what I do is I'm not a licensed mental health.
Mhm.
So I can't do anything that proclaims to be therapy or counseling. What I try to do is give people education in grief and grieving and mourning and what all of that is like. A lot of us are so incredibly ignorant about these things. And we have been introduced to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work from the 70s about the five stages of grief. That was that was limited to a very specific population and meant to be applied and construed in a very specific circumstance. And that's what sticks with people.
Mm.
That's what they remember. And I mean, I have my own view of grief. If you look at the psychological definition, it is a whole body response to loss. The loss can be any kind of loss. It could be a divorce, it could be an illness, it could be a loss of financial security, it can be a loss of housing, of friendship, a family member. All of those kinds of things count as loss, and we feel grief about them. And grief for me is a it's not grief is not a single emotion. Grief is a constellation, a kind of jumble thing where everything is just moving around and it's never the same thing twice. And these are all of the things that would come up in the course of the relationship anyway, in the course of the attachment. So when you change the access that you have to that attachment, then suddenly there's not really a way that makes sense to express this stuff or to know where to put it. And a lot of times it just feels very displaced because the attachment may still be there. So in the death of a cat, for example, you remain attached to your cat long after death. You continue to love your cat after death. You continue to have a relationship with your cat after death. It's just that your access to the relationship is different.
Mhm.
And so in grieving, there's a lot of frustration around that change of access. Grieving is learning how to continue to be in a relationship. Grieving is dealing with the memories that pop up and just totally get in your face when you're not ready for them to, and knowing how to process that and knowing how to figure out who you are after this, because this relationship has been a part of your identity. And now that the relationship is still there, but your access to it is different, how does that change who you are, how
Mm.
you identify as a person? Your routines are going to be different every day because maybe you've been in long-term caregiving mode and you've had 6 different medications to dose during the day, every day. You've had a lot of extra laundry to do, from vomiting, from diarrhea. You've had extra grooming to do, all of those kinds of things. And then suddenly they're just gone. And all of these anchor points that you've had in your day disappear. So, it's no wonder that people feel unmoored when something like this happens. Um, Because truly, it's a neuroplasticity challenge for us. We have these brains that have been wired and connected to function in this relationship for such a long time. And now the relationship is really different because the ways of connecting and the access that we've had is not available in the same way anymore.
Yeah.
And so teaching people some of the things about the actual cognitive stuff that is going on with you while you were grieving, I find is really helpful for them because it takes away some of the shame and the stigma, like, well, I can't remember things, or I feel so disorganized, or my body really hurts. I can't sleep. It's been 6 months. I should be doing better than this, and I'm not. And that's not because people aren't trying, and it's not because they're sad. It's because they're overwhelmed, and there are actual physiological reasons for all of this stuff happening. And I think that I know that for myself, when I know that and I embrace that, oh, well, this is happening because of this. It's not because I am going to spin off the planet or insert all kinds of comments about mental health that are horrible that people often say jokingly. Uh, yeah, I think when we integrate grief into a part of our daily lives, it becomes much more manageable because it's part of the way that we function. And that's really what I want to help people do. Not not to cure anything, not to have them get over anybody, but how can we work this into your life
Mm.
so that you feel like it's beneficial. There are days when, of course, you're going to have a really hard time, but it's like that for all aspects of life,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't do us any good when we don't talk about it and we don't pay attention to it.
Yeah, and there's definitely no blueprint or playbook to get, to make the grief go away any faster. It's a very unique experience, unlike any I've ever encountered. And yeah, there is no like I should be feeling like this by now because it's a complicated process, I think,
Yeah.
that we go through. Now, I know you've mentioned about creating legacy projects in your work. Can you explain kind of what this looks like for pets and how it helps families heal?
Okay. Uh, well, one of the more popular things that I do for people is they're memorial portraits, but they're portraits that are made from things that have been a part of daily life. So it's more of instead of just a painting that you hang on your wall, it is definitely all kinds of media. And they're not sculptural, but they tend to be a little more three-dimensional. And it's things like, okay, so I am a person who does this. I tend to keep paperwork from vet visits long after I need to, especially if that paperwork is related to somebody's chronic health condition.
Mm.
I, the first dog I adopted as an adult, he died in 2007 and he had chronic active hepatitis. So it was a long time of caring for him with liver failure, essentially. And I know this is a cat show. I still have some of the invoices, some of the lab results, and I keep that stuff because I I want reminders that I can see that have some sort of um, quantitative information on them that it was really as bad as I remember it being because it was hard. It was really, really hard. And I know that at some point I'm going to be ready to move on from his paperwork. Now, with other animals in the family, there's been a horse and there's been cats and there's been dogs. I'm more comfortable letting some of that go. But for people that think that they're ready to pass on those invoices and the lab results, I will take them. And what I do is I usually take copies of them. I don't take the originals. I take copies of them and I will paint over them a little bit with something that's translucent so you can still see the print that's underneath it. And I will make them into a collage that is a portrait of the animal. That's mixed in with some other things. So it could be pieces of fabric from a coat or a bed or a blanket. We usually almost always include the collar and put that into the portrait. Because collars are not as much for cats, but definitely for dogs are really important items. And there have been times that I've included things from gears from a watch, which was just bizarre. The person said, "Hey, I have this watch from my grandmother. Um, It needs to be in the portrait." So yeah, we work that in. So anything that people trust me with and they want to keep it, but they don't want to keep it, if you know what I mean. Because we all get into clutter mode, right? And then we think, well, this isn't useful to me anymore. There's no
Right.
way to hold on to this. But to get rid of it feels wrong. So it's a way of incorporating some of those things into a piece of art that you can place wherever it is that you need to place it. And it's repurposing that stuff that was a very tangible part of how you lived together and what those experiences were like.
Yeah, I love that. When you mentioned that you still have some of the invoices, it reminded me, this is kind of silly, but I still have kept like one or two of the voicemails from my vet
Mhm.
calling me with my cat Mia's, kidney value. If she'd get her kidney
Yeah.
values checked every 3 months, and she'd call, and if I didn't answer, she'd leave a message, and I still have some of those recording. I don't know why I've kept them. It's just, almost like a source of comfort. It's a memory, I guess,
Yeah.
that I have. So, and then do you also, I know you make some of this art for your client, but do you also, almost like, I guess the way I want to ask this, so it's like, do you teach people how to create works of art to remember their pets, like you're talking about?
I haven't put together a course specifically for memorial type portraits that would be available online, for example. I do a lot of teaching in person. Um, so it will be the kind of thing where somebody asks, "Hey, I've got a group of friends. There's four of us. Um, we want to kind of do a paint and sip type of thing, but not really because that feels embarrassing and we're kind of rowdy. Plus, we want to paint our animals and we expect that we're going to be crying a lot and we don't want to do that in public.
Mm.
So, could you come to our living room and guide us through the process?" So it would be something a bit like that. There are other things that I have that are all because this is a part of the business that I'm not great at is keeping things available, especially when I change platforms and stuff. But I do have some courses that are totally self study that's designed for, I call them invitations. So it's not specifically you do these things in this order. And if yours doesn't look like this, then it's wrong. But it's reflecting on prompts that are meaningful to you about the relationship that you have and about the memories that you share and finding ways to express that. And some of them are very open. There's an ebook called Permission to Grieve, um, which is or permission to feel, that's what it's called. Um, which is like that, and it's totally open to any way that people want to create and move with those feelings, whether that's picking up a camera or it's something like curating a playlist. See, people tell me that they're not creative and they're not artistic,
But
but have you ever put together a playlist? If you have, then you have an idea of what things you like and what things you don't like and what things go together well for you. putting together a playlist is a creative practice. You don't have to be the one making the music. You have your own way of enjoying it, and you have your own way of grouping things together. And maybe you have a playlist for when you're feeling really up and energized. Maybe you have a playlist for when you're not feeling that way, but you want to be. All of those different things. We're taking the time to think about, okay, well, how would I like to feel? And then we're doing things to help us get there in the future. So that all counts. That's the way that I approach art. That's one of my hallmark questions. How would you like to feel when you take in this piece of art? That's what I'm going for. If you're hoping for something that's going to be dignified and maybe feel very serious, that's a completely different approach on my part from something that is going to remind you um, um, your cat that liked to play hide and seek and was just the worst hider ever. 'Cause I had one of those
The
cats.
tail sticking out.
So I hid his head and assumed that no one could see him. He was completely invisible, but he was a massive guy. And so his whole body and his tail are sticking out all over the place. And, so it's considering that stuff is really important, much more important than techniques in brush strokes and stuff like that. People
Mhm.
get hung up on the technical things. So when I
Yeah.
teach, I really try to emphasize other parts of that.
Mm. Thanks for saying that, putting together a playlist is creative because I'm one of those that says, "I'm not creative." Well, back in my day growing up, we would put together mixtapes, around. Yeah, and that was fun. But, just to kind of play on that, you can, I think, just find really what moves and inspires you. For example, for me, I put together this podcast in honor of Nomar and Mia, my two cats that have passed away, in part to kind of create that legacy and to do something to honor them and to just remember them. And I guess putting together a podcast like this can be considered art or
Yes.
creative. I know, like, I'm not a good drawer, so that's where I think like, oh, I'm not creative. I can't. There are other ways, like you mentioned, to be creative. And then something else that I'm doing to create a legacy for my cats that have passed away, I've started a fund through an animal shelter here in Tennessee where I live, and it's called the Nomar and Mia Compassion Fund. And we are raising money to help, as animals get sick, the vet bills can stack up. So we're raising money for to help individuals who can't afford their vet bills. And so one thing I actually have coming up in like 9 days from when we're recording this is a hike. It's a tribute hike. So people are coming out, they're making donations towards this fund. We're going on a hike. I find hiking and being outdoors can be healing for people. But I'm calling it less. You don't have to have lost a pet to do this hike. So I'm calling it more of like a celebration. So there's going to be a hike. There's going to be a vendor market. We're going to have food trucks. We're going to have a memory wall where you can share pictures or memories of your pet. And it's really going to be a good time. And I'm personally put this together again to raise money for this fund, but just to keep Mia no more in my mind. That's my way of helping myself heal through grief, is to just do things in their honor and in their memory. So yeah, just wanted to share that in case it sparks some ideas for some of the listeners how they can create a legacy with their pets for sure. Mm.
That's
So
fantastic.
thanks, yeah. And I know, Shannon, y- you've said like your work involves a lot of feeling the things, as you put it. What are maybe some, I know we talked a little bit about it, but maybe some creative exercises or practices you can recommend for people to express their grief in a healthy way?
Mm. Um, well, we'll start with something really easy. So if we go back to the playlist idea,
Mm.
if There is, one of the things that I did, I, let's see, when was that? It's been 3 years ago. So I lived with an orange tabby cat.
Mhm.
His name's Ween. He died when he was 19 years old.
Mm.
And he was kind of like a Buddha of a cat. Just very, I mean, he wasn't like that when he was young. He was rowdy. But we had I felt like he was my mentor, right? And so as he is preparing to die, I was putting together a playlist of songs that I thought that he would recommend to me to listen to as, ooh, getting teary, as
Mm.
reminders of some of the things that we've experienced together, but also the stuff that it seemed like he would remind me of frequently. Because I'm a really anxious person. He was not at all anxious. And he would come to me when I was spinning out of control and I felt absolutely just out of it. And he would come and help settle me. And so that simple thing of putting together that playlist of just things that reminded me of stuff that he would say. If he were writing songs and writing lyrics and composing music, what would he do? And I still have that playlist and I still listen to it on days when I feel like I need his wisdom and not in a lot of the time I feel him around. But on a day when I need more of a direct message, I feel like I need more of a distinct connection, I will play some of those songs. And it just feels that music feels like him.
Yeah.
And so I think that that is such an accessible way for people to exercise their creativity, to be a little bit playful, to honor someone who has died or any sort of relationship that has ended. Working with the foster community, for example, is a big thing because they go through all of these big emotions. Sometimes they're fostering animals for a year or more. And then suddenly the animal gets adopted, which is amazing and also a big loss for them. I also do some work with Guide Dogs for the Blind,
Mm.
and they have puppy raisers, and the puppies go to families to stay for about the first year of their lives, and then they go back to the university. And there's so much of a conflict of emotions there because
Mm.
nobody's dying, and yet still there's very real grief. So that kind of remember me playlist, I think, is a really good exercise for people, especially when they say, well, I'm not artistic and I'm not creative and I can't draw and I can't paint. It doesn't have to be like that. Um, Another thing that has to do with music is to put on music that feels a way that you enjoy feeling, or maybe it was a song that you listened to together. So I used to have a Sunday morning routine where I would play Nora Jones while I started laundry and did some cleaning up in the kitchen and maybe would make some muffins or something like that. And one of my dogs at the time everybody else would sleep in and he would come out with me and he would sit in the living room and watch me the whole time while I was in the kitchen.
Mm.
And so when I played her music, I think of him putting something like that on. And then if you have just even a little 8-pan watercolor set that kids use at school, making some marks on paper that feel like how you feel when you're listening to the music.
Mm.
It doesn't have to be, doesn't have to look like anything. Nobody's going to be around to judge you. You don't have to show it to anybody. You don't have to talk about it. But making marks, that's what I call it. Making marks to the music. Um, there's more. there's more complicated things, but there's so many things that are simple, like um, picking up little reminders or photographing things that remind you of them,
Yeah.
or looking for a certain color. So maybe your cat was calico, and maybe you start looking for things that have kind of a tricolor thing appearance to them, and you photograph those and you keep them in your camera roll with a little tag on them so that you can look at that. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Yeah. Yeah, I love your ideas with the music because again, that I think of things like you're drawing and
Mhm.
it's so simple and gosh, what great ideas for music. One thing that I've done that has been helpful is to almost like journal. And so I bought a journal, or actually it was gifted to me when my first cat, Nomar, passed away. And I spent the first several weeks and months like writing letters, letters to Nomar, gratitude letters, love letters, telling him how much I loved him and how much he means to me and how I wish he was still here. And just something like that. So for those that maybe, again, I'm thinking of the people like me who are like, well, I
Mhm.
don't do anything like eight or wall. Just we can all probably write some words. And again, your idea of photography, we all probably have smartphones with camera on it. We may not be professional photographers, but we can take some really good photos now with our camera phones. And so, yeah, really easy things that we could do to start out.
And yeah, it does not have to be complicated. People hear creative and they automatically say, "Nope, I can't do that."
Yeah.
But it's just something that you have to. I mean, I come from a long line of art teachers
Mm,
when I was young that told me that I really sucked and I should just not even waste my time. Though I quit and I didn't start making art painting until I was 40.
ew.
So, I think a lot of the things that we believe about ourselves come from other people, especially around creativity and artistic expression and whether or not we're strong people, because strong people, like we expect them to not have emotions.
Yeah.
Absurd and ridiculous. It's the strong people who are able to be vulnerable and
Mm,
express how they feel.
yeah.
And you get to decide who is safe and who isn't, and what are safe times and which aren't. Um, but holding it all in or trying to shove it into some sort of virtual closet of feelings is not going to help you. I promise, because
Mm.
I've done that for a long time.
I've done that too. Now I just cry. I let it out. And and then, and also like putting together a collage, maybe you touched on that a little bit, just finding, I don't know, I'm picturing like, finding fur or like a favorite
Okay.
toy or, bits of, favorite food, like a can of food or something like that, where you don't have to be an artist. You don't have to know how to draw. You can just like find favorite things like that you might, or keepsakes, and maybe you put it on something that you can frame and hang on the wall or something like that. So,
Exactly.
yeah, very nice. Well, Shannon, as we begin to wrap up, would love to give you the mic, so to speak, to share a little bit more about the work you do, your website, and how we can kind of keep in touch with you.
Oh, okay. Well,
Okay.
I'm at slobberedlens.com. That's my website. I'm
Love that
on
name.
Facebook and Instagram as well, although I'm moving away from those because various reasons.
Yeah.
Mm. So
Oh,
most of what I'm doing social media wise is on Substack. If you
okay.
go and look for Substack on Slobbered Lens, you will find me there.
Okay. Great. And then what do you, when you sent me kind of the information in terms of the platforms you were on, what specifically are you doing with Substack? So if we find you, Slobbered Lens on Substack, what will we be looking out for?
I write a lot on Substack. So I used to do a lot of writing for Facebook because it's a longer format friendly. And that now that is going on Substack. There's a lot of stories about just general life with animals. There are many things that are specific to grief and grieving. There
Mm.
are some things about photography and art, about the process of creating things. Um, it's really a mixed bag. There's also quite a few stories about the person that is referred to as the boy, who is my son,
Mhm.
because he's such a big part of everything and he's tied into everything. Uh, So what I've learned in doing this work is that everything is connected and it all flows. So business advice about how you do just one thing on one website, and if you want to do something else, then you have to do a different website for that. That doesn't make sense to me. It all sort of bleeds into each other.
Right. Yeah. And I love on your Slobbered Lens website, you have a page that talks about each of your animals, those in the past and those that are still living. I was like, gosh, I need this for my website. So thanks for
Yeah.
that.
I call that the advisory board
Yes.
because it really, to me, they do really function that way, whether living or dead, because um, I just revere them so much. I
Mm.
learn so much from them. I am supposed to be in the position of having the bigger brain and the longer lifespan, ergo more experience and wisdom. But they're all so different.
Yeah.
They all have different skills. They have these different natural abilities that I don't have. And I watch them do things and I just think, what is a complete marvel? You are teaching me so much just by
Yeah.
allowing me to witness your life.
Right.
And that I may not be able to do this thing that you can do, but you bet I'm learning from the experience of being a witness to it. And I can take something from it.
Yeah. Our animals teach us so much. So, and I know everybody watching their animal lover. So, well, I'll make sure to link up all your sites and places to connect with you in the show notes here. Shannon, oh my gosh, this was so amazing. I learned a lot. Thank you for giving us so many creative ideas on how we can kind of keep the connection with our pets alive and well and help us heal through grief. I really appreciate you and thank you for being an amazing guest on the Cat Dad Show.
Thank you for having me and for putting up with the cat bet.
You're very welcome. Everybody watching, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Bye.